You're listening to 90.1 FM. I'm in the studio with the Lucky Valentines, straight out of
Fort Benton.
Fort Benton, right. Can you tell us a little bit about the band and how it came together?
We saw each other playing at a fundraiser, and we were both smitten, as it goes. And yeah, long story short, I saw him play, and I said to my mom, I want that one. And he saw me play, and his friend said, you're going to marry that girl. And we loved each other's music, and we started hanging out, and we've been playing pretty much since our first date. And then we ended up getting married on Valentine's Day, which is cheesy, and but it seemed like a memorable name. So now we're the Lucky Valentines.
It's all true. Every bit of it, 100% true.
And you have 4 kids, I saw.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Who watches your kids when you guys are out on the road?
We just leave them with the oldest, and I'm kidding.
No, our oldest is 8.
No, our moms are absolutely fantastic. We got 2 of the best moms on the planet.
Yep.
You both from Fort Benton?
I'm from Great Falls originally, born and raised there.
And you were playing at a function in
Great Falls.
Great
A
Falls.
friend of ours was doing some Hurricane Katrina relief and was holding a fundraiser for that, and we were both invited to play. So
Okay.
Sparks flew.
2005, right?
Well,
Katrina?
actually 2000. Oh, well, maybe I'm wrong about Katrina.
No, there were still rebuilding efforts going on.
Okay.
Yeah,
At
it was
that point.
2009 when we met.
Yeah, so.
That was a different decade, a different Kanye ago. So, talk about maybe some of your influences, if you wouldn't mind.
Sure. One of the big ones for me is Patty Griffin.
Uh-huh.
When growing up, I'd never heard her, but when I was about... I actually have been writing songs since I was 13. I picked up the guitar and really started doing it. So my first song that I ever learned was Mazzy Star, actually. And I really loved like Alanis Morissette and Jewel and the Cranberries. But when I met Patty Griffin, musically, it totally revolutionized my songwriting and the way that I heard music.
And I started out actually playing electric guitar, playing blues music and that sort of thing. And discovered songwriting in my late teens and early 20s. And so, Eric Clapton, Neil Young, Bob Dylan,
Stevie Ray,
Tom Waits, Miles Davis, Stevie Ray Vaughan, all that stuff. All the heavy hitters, basically. And subsequently, after meeting Jamie and all that, Patty Griffin's a huge influence. Buddy Miller is another one. Willie Nelson as well. And Hank Williams. Hank Williams is huge. Just those kind of just really, really simple basis songwriters who write about really, really incredible things in really sort of simple ways.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we like to call ourselves sad bastards, and we love music that makes us cry. So any song that's about something that actually pulls us, that's always it's always good for us.
So getting into music in Great Falls and Fort Benton, how did that come about? Just listening to like Mazzy Star, as you were saying, or
well, my parents were very. My mom had me in violin lessons when I was like 4, and we also did. My sister, I have 3 sisters, and we all played violin. My mom had us in like the youth orchestra and also the Great Falls Children's Choir, the touring choir there. So I had a lot of classical influence as well growing up. And a lot of music lessons, which was great. But then when I started writing for myself, that was more, I would say, more like the things I was listening to that my sisters brought home or that we discovered on the radio. I listened to a lot of like K99 growing up, which is a little embarrassing now. And I don't like K99 at all.
Nobody knows what that is.
Yeah, I know. I don't even, what is it even called now? I don't know. Anyways, but then for songwriting, things changed for me a little bit.
Yeah, and I, for me, growing up, Mom played guitar in the worship team at church, right? And so that was kind of a thing. There was a guitar in the house, and I always wanted to mess with it, kind of thing. And she'd let me mess with it, and I didn't know how to make heads or tails of it. And she got me one of my own when I was about 9 or 10 years old, and I took 3 lessons, and the guy taught me a couple chords, and it became apparent that it wasn't probably going to take, just because I'm real stubborn and real hard-headed, and it just wasn't working. And so that happened, and then I turned, I think I was 14 or 15 years old, and I bought a guitar magazine out of the blue just for fun, and there was some articles in it about this kid who was my age named Johnny Lang. He was I think he's a couple years older than me. He was 15 or 16, but he had a record out, and he was talking about blues music, talking about playing lead guitar, blues music, that sort of thing, talking about B.B. King, talking about Stevie Ray Vaughan, that sort of thing. And by the grace of God, I went looking for these records to find these guys, and the only place that we ever went as a family to shop where they had CDs was Shopko. And we went to Shopko, and they didn't have any Stevie Ray Vaughan, but they had B.B. King, and I bought a B.B. King record, and I was off to the races at that point. It was probably not even 6 months before I'd mowed enough lawns to buy my first electric guitar, and had a neighbor give me an amp, and I sat in my room with B.B. King and just taught myself how to play that way, listening to records and learn how to play by ear, and then met friends who played music, met friends who song wrote, and just learned from them.
Were there many blues musicians in Great Falls at the time?
There's a few guys. I cut my teeth with the band that has gone through a couple of incarnations with a guy named Gary Atwell down in Great Falls, Hound Dog. Hound Dog's Rock and Blues, Hound Dog's Blues Pulse, Hound Dog's Stormy Monday. Those guys used to play out at Murph's Bowling Alley. And there'd be bands that would come through from Minneapolis and that sort of thing that were kind of, they're touring bands, touring blues bands and that sort of thing. And I got to the point where the bouncer would let me in because I was underage, but he'd let me in because he knew I wasn't going to cause problems. I just wanted to play guitar. And the bands would let me sit in. And so I learned a ton doing that. But that's where that came from.
Very cool. Hey, well, you guys are performing tonight at Triple Dog.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And this will be the second time you've played?
It's our first.
It's our second time in Havre, but our first at Triple Dog. Yeah, the first time we ever played in Havre was just this summer at the Havre Trails Brew Fest. But we're actually really excited to be, because you're our neighbors, some of our closest neighbors up here in Havre. So,
right. Yeah,
we're really excited to be breaking in here.
Where do you guys play in Fort Benton, and how often do you play?
We don't play all that often in Fort Benton, honestly. We run a restaurant and coffee house there with Jamie's sister.
What's that one called?
It's called the Wake Cup Coffee House.
You guys run that?
Yeah.
Quite good.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, my sister started that when she was 20, and so we bought in like 4 years ago, but we do play there once every couple months.
Yeah, something like that.
And then we've been playing around Montana. Actually, tonight is our 50th gig of the year, which is pretty exciting. This will be our most busy year gigging ever.
Yeah.
But we play in Bozeman and
Livingston,
we're in Missoula
Norris,
at the end of this month. And so, yeah,
Helena.
It's been pretty awesome, actually. Montana has been very welcoming to us, and we've got a lot of different places around the state.
Great.
Yeah.
Well, we're lucky to have you here, Valentine. Should not do that.
I know. It's a terrible name.
I didn't mean to do that.
That's all good.
But maybe we could play, or we could hear a song.
Yeah, sure.
All right.
This is...
We're thinking of playing you, actually. We have like close to 50 songs, and this is one of the first ones that we wrote. But it's just kind of about... Sean and I, he was living in Great Falls, and I was living in Fort Benton when we met. And we spent a lot of hours, like every single day, probably twice a day. One or the other of us drove back and forth every day to see each other. So.
It's called You Never Knew.